Well, the teenage years can be a tumultuous phase, compounded by surging hormones, physical changes and social anxiety. But a new book promises to provide parents with guidelines on how to help their teens navigate their growing pains.
When Life Sucks, this is it, has been described as a first aid manual for some of life's toughest challenges. Its author is psychiatrist, parent and sometimes comedian, Dr Jo Prendergast, who joins us in the studio. Dr Prendergast, welcome.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
I feel like there's something in this for everyone. What was the purpose of this book?
Yeah, so the purpose really was to try and fill a gap, because I know there's a lot of very desperate families out there with teenagers struggling and very stretched resources in terms of mental health services. And I knew myself, parenting teenagers, there were often times where you kind of go, I don't know quite what to do in this situation, or I wish there was like a manual of what to do when your kid's struggling. And so I have very much written it like a first aid manual, full of practical tips and also when to reach out for help.
It covers a huge range of topics, from the lighter ones to the really more serious ones about mental health, etc. What is your messaging around some of those more serious matters that parents really grapple with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. I mean, it's World Suicide Prevention Day today, to realise that we really need to be able to have conversations about the gritty end of mental health, because, you know, recent studies in Australia have suggested up to 25% of young people have harmed themselves in the last year. So it's a huge number of young people out there struggling, and I think there's quite a lot of myths about mental health in terms of, you know, don't mention suicide or self-harm because it will put the idea into their head, whereas in actual fact it opens up a conversation, and it's an opportunity if a young person is struggling with their mental health to go, hey, by the way, I have felt like that, Mum and Dad. So really important to have those conversations and to make emotions, mental health topics that we can chat about with our kids.
A lot of the time, the first encounter with an issue, be it small or large, as a parent, you're kind of left going, I'm not quite sure how serious this is. What's your advice about how to get help around that? Yeah,
I mean, I think if a young person ever mentions not wanting to be around, life's not worth living, suicidal thoughts or self-harming behaviour, is to always get a mental health assessment. It's quite easy to dismiss those things as, oh, you know, don't be silly and things like that, but really important, because it's, you know, parents shouldn't be assessing their own young person's risk.
But sometimes it can be as simple as just not having a lot of energy or being isolated. Not having a huge friendship group, and that can be very serious, or it could be something very easily fixed at the same time. Yeah,
I mean, I think the things to look out for is when there's been a big change in your young person's behaviour. You know, if they've always been a very introverted young person, that may be who they are, but if they'd been a social, involved in things kid and then suddenly they're withdrawing, that's a real red flag that something's going on. So any change in their functioning, so parents need to be really observant and not presume things are a phase.
The title of the book, Jo, When Life Sucks. As a teenager, we've all been there.
Yes.
You know, there are times when life does not feel as great as it possibly might for a range of issues as a teenager. But do you think if you look at decades ago to now, the challenges are greater for teenagers?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I was a teenager, it was more about, you know, does my crush like me? You know, that was my biggest issue. I think with the pandemic seems to have really escalated teen mental health difficulties, with psychologists are reporting a 60% increase in young people presenting with anxiety and depression, and eating disorders have really flared up, and self-harm. So it's definitely, you know, even compared to a couple of years ago, teenage mental health's more complicated. But, you know, when you've got smartphones and half of the kids saying they're addicted to their smartphones and exposure to everything, it really makes life more complicated.
I was just going to ask that, devices. I mean,
technology.
None of us is a saint, right?
Yes.
But how about these
You've got yours here ready to scroll.
No, absolutely. But like, how do we manage this in the life of a teenager?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, you know, and with half teenagers saying they're addicted to their phones, we've already got a significant issue, and a huge number of adults as well. I think the main things are to try and use devices in a positive way. You know, young people, their whole social world is their phone. So it's like they're cutting off a limb if you say no phones. But trying to get kids aware, to monitor the amount of time they're spending on their phone, ideally to not have phones in bedrooms overnight. So just ways to try and manage it and to use it in a sort of pro-social, connecting, finding out information way rather than sort of doom scrolling and comparing themselves.
And modelling is good too, obviously. You know, if you're at home on it all the time saying, get off your phone. And
exactly.
It's kind of a bit of a disconnect there, isn't there? Jo, throughout your life's work, not just as a psychiatrist, you're also a comedian. How is it... How important is getting a message through comedy? Like, do you find that you get greater cut through?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have found that comedy is a great vehicle for messages. My next show is actually called Cancer and Cartwheels, about my cancer survivorship, and I've got a lot of messages in that show that I'm delivering through comedy. And in my show, The Cool Mum, I do talk about only needing to be a good enough parent. You don't need to be perfect. Yeah, there we go.
That's what he was saying. We don't need to be perfection.
I know. Well, that's something to really hold on. Because a lot of parenting books about being a great parent and an amazing parent and a blissful household, but that's not the reality for most families. Just clinging on to good enough is often what you need to do to kind of be okay there.
So that's one great tip. What are some other key takeaway tips that we could leave our listeners, our viewers with?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is sort of self-care is incredibly important, because if parents are not in a good place emotionally with their mental health, then things are less likely to go well with your teen. So most parents' self-care is down there kind of next to Christmas shopping in terms of priorities. So really important to look after your own well-being so that you can be calm enough to deal with your teenager. Really observant, notice changes and reach out for help. Parents know their teenager best, so if you've got a gut feeling that things aren't right with your kid, reach out for help, and there's a huge number of places that you can reach. It's not always mental health service. There's helplines, there's online apps, there's organisations that can offer support, so really do reach out if you've got any concerns about your young person.
Dr Jo Prendergast, so good to talk to you. It's been immensely useful.
Hasn't it? Yes.
Read the book, cover to cover.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Lovely to see you. Thank you.
And if you need information or support, you can contact Beyond Blue on 1300 22 4636. Or if you or someone you know is experiencing distress, please contact Lifeline. That's 13 11 14.